Hey, sister, welcome back to the Step Up series. I can imagine that my sister friends who are tuning into this episode are outgoing officers. We just need to start this episode with a deep breath. Sister friends, take a deep inhale with me. Exhale. Congratulations, you've arrived. The end of your term is near, if not already over. I hope that you feel so encouraged and really proud of yourself. You navigated an unimaginable experience moving from a completely virtual membership experience, right? Learning how to run sorority with everyone all spread out through technology, moving it from there all the way back in person, right? I can only imagine the pressure, the stressors, the unexpected nuances of running sorority from virtual to in person, and you did it. I hope you feel so accomplished because regardless of what you have actually accomplished, what is written or tangible on paper, you grew as a leader, as a member of your chapter, as a sister, as an individual, as a future professional. You are better prepared for life than you were maybe before you held this role. Maybe you're a little bit more tired, maybe a little bit more burnt out than when you have held this role. But I wanted to spend some time together today because I want to help you find your new role in the chapter. And that starts with transitioning out of it really well. So let's talk about, go back with me to your officer transition. When you think back to how that process went, when you got elected, I'm sure you were excited, maybe a little surprised, maybe caught off guard, maybe you were disappointed, maybe you've held a position all year that you didn't really want, but whatever emotions you were feeling, you surely sat down or zoomed in with your previous officer to walk through the different levels or layers of your position. Think back to me how effective that process was. Was it empowering? Was it informative? Or did it feel a little rushed? Did she feel a little overwhelmed? Were you a little overwhelmed? Did you even know the questions you should be asking, right? There's a lot that goes into officer transitions because of the time of year and the dynamics that are at play, right? There's a lot of things that can hinder those from being efficient. And so before we even talk about being the kind of sister that you've been longing to in your chapter without a title, probably, let's talk about how your transition process should go. Because I imagine that you're either in one of two camps. One, you're like, get me out of here, right? I am done. Let me move on from being chapter president or vice president of finance. I don't want to plan another fundraiser again in my life. Philanthropy was so exhausting. Whatever your role, you could be just absolutely over it. And if you had the option today, you would just be done. Or you might be a little hesitant to let go. Maybe you had a lot of goals and a lot of aspirations that weren't all able to be accomplished this year. That sometimes can leave lingering feelings of regret or, man, I should have rerun for this position. And it can be difficult to successfully or efficiently transition when you're still holding on to maybe even the status or the title that you held in the chapter. So regardless of where you're at as you're going into transitions, I want you to think back to yourself a year ago when you were going through this process to assume your role. What did you need, or what do you wish you had from the sister who was transitioning you? Do you wish she'd been a little bit more present? Do you wish she would have been a little bit more organized in the way that she shared with you everything you needed to know? Do you wish that she'd been a little bit more hands off, let you just like run the show finally? Think through for me. Maybe you can even like pause this video and I want you to think through what those things were that you needed. As you think through those things, I also want to let you know that her sorority journey just launched a completely virtual pre-recorded officer transition workshop that you can utilize for your chapter's officer transitions. You can facilitate it yourself. Just pop my little face in there to facilitate some of the large group lecture style sessions, and then you just run the discussion. If that would simplify your officer transitions process, make sure to head over to our show notes or the program description so that you can learn a little bit more about the program and see if that would be a good fit for your chapter or community in this transition of leadership. All right, so now we're back thinking about what we needed from the sister that we transitioned. Now, while that's going to be different for every person, recognizing too that the sister that you are about to transition is not you, right? Let's think through a couple of the big areas that I think are really going to change the way that you move forward and she assumes this role efficiently. The first is an intentional transition, right? I'm sure that regardless of your experience last year, there is an extra level that you could provide for your sister friend that could provide a level of ease or confidence for her as she transitions. If that's you being a little bit more organized going into that meeting or that workshop, whatever it is, whatever structure it is that your chapter or community facilitates, being super organized about the different levels of your job and how she can take ownership of those right away, right? Because it's her job now. Maybe it's actually setting aside time and not being on your phone, not checking your email, but actually just sitting with her to answer her questions and just being super present, which takes us into our next point, which is being available to answer questions after transition, right? There's going to come a point where you're going to have to set boundaries with her and say, hey, there are other people for you to utilize. But as long as it is not encroaching on your membership experience outside the chapter, I would encourage you to be available for her to ask questions to. If it's, hey, remind me how you did this last year, or could you remind me the process to go through to accomplish the task that needs to be done? Whatever those little things are, I would encourage you to ensure that you communicate to her that you are open and available to be access, to ask questions. You can set those boundaries if it becomes a little bit abused, but up until a point, I would really encourage you to make yourself available for her to ask questions without judgment. That's the key here, right? Because there was a time that you were new too and didn't know the answers to all these questions. So creating a safe relationship for her to be able to ask you and really pick your brain. The next thing that I'd really encourage you to do is communicate in your transition or afterwards that she is free to make decisions different than you did, right? She's free to change things. You can give her guidance on things that didn't work for you. But at the end of the day, she should feel confident and empowered that she was elected for a reason, and she can go against the grain, go against the way things have always been done if it's in the best interest of the chapter. And she's going to want your support, your sign, your blessing of approval that you encourage her to do so. So I think encouraging her to say, hey, you have the freedom to make the best decisions for the chapter, even if those don't look like the ones that I made, that's okay. And this last one really ties into helping you find your place in the chapter. The biggest thing that I would encourage you to do is vocally and through your actions, demonstrate your support for your sister, for this newly elected officer who had the role that you did. She is going to be nervous, right? And sometimes, as you know, you had to make decisions that the chapter didn't always agree with. So the least you can do is have her best interests at heart. And when the chapter is revolting from some decision that she made in the best interest of the chapter, the organization, the community at large, the least you can do is, through what you say and how you show up, support her. Trust her, even without knowing the long list of decisions or inputs that filtered into why that decision was made, right? You're not on exec anymore. You won't know those things, but the least you can do is support your incoming exec in the way that you needed to be supported the year prior. Now, I am a strong believer in this because no one knows how hard it is to be in that role in your chapter, probably except you. Maybe there's one other sister friend who's a year older than you who's also had this lived experience, but there's very few of you who have served in your specific role. And because of that, there is an extra bond of sisterhood that you have with her, that you have with sisters on exec, that should be cherished, that should be protected. And the best way you can do that is be a member of the chapter that uplifts, builds up, and supports the initiatives and the efforts of the newly elected leaders. Because just in the same way that you were new the year prior, making decisions maybe that the entire chapter didn't agree with, now there is a new team in place to do the same thing, to fight the same battles. And as you are leaving this role, whether you are enthusiastic to be leaving or still holding on a little bit, the least you can do is show your support in how you speak and how you act. Now, when it comes to finding your specific role in the chapter, I would encourage you that you don't have to do everything anymore, right? There's a lot of pressure that we put on exec to be everywhere, support everyone, do everything. Remove that pressure, right? But I would encourage you to find your niche in the chapter, the thing that you're really passionate about, and go all in on that, right? If that's sisterhood, being a committee leader, or being a strong committee member, or a small group leader, or just offering a helping hand to the sisterhood chair, showing your support. It doesn't mean you have to go to every philanthropy event, right? But maybe if you just double down on one area of the chapter and show your support in a way that is really life-giving to you, it will not only demonstrate to the chapter that you are still committed, you are still present, but it will actually motivate you too to keep showing up, because you are getting poured into through an area of a chapter that means a lot to you, just as much as you are able to still continue giving back without a title. Really tying in to an episode we had on the podcast last week around titleless leadership. And I would also encourage you, even though you don't have to do everything anymore, continue meeting those bare minimum requirements, right? Work on your grades, pay your dues, show up to chapter, don't make excuses around mandatory events, right? There are still things that every member is expected. And if you start slacking on, they're going to notice, because you were just in a position of power, titled leadership, not too long ago. You still have influence in the chapter, friend. Don't use that to weaken the efforts of the new executive board, right? They are fighting really hard to maintain a strong, well-balanced chapter that is rooted on some really basic expectations, right? It is your responsibility to meet those expectations while also taking time to heal and grow and reset with a little bit more time on your hands to focus on the areas of the chapter that mean a lot to you, and maybe some other things too. Whatever that looks like for you, know that we are in your corner to support you as you make this really tough jump from being in a position of power and influence into one where sisters are still looking up to you without that responsibility. So you get to decide how you're going to steward that influence. We're here to support you as you make those decisions. I hope you'll share this episode with maybe another sister on exec who is fighting the same battle, also navigating life after leadership.